Hey, what's going on? My name is Damon. I forgot my name for a second. My name is Damon Brown. Damon Brown of DamonBrown.net. My main thing is helping you as a side hustler, a solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. If you're new to the show, this is the Bring Your Worst show. I come to you live every Wednesday, and then it's a recorded episode every Monday and Friday. This is stasis right now. We'll see how long I can do it. I've been coming to you live every Wednesday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here in Vegas for, man, I think I just checked my stats. Since Thanksgiving, and we just had Easter here in America. So yeah, we're rolling, and so excited to have your support, the love. The YouTube channel over at youtube.com/BrownDamon is growing. I'll throw the link up to that in a second. But I really appreciate the support. The main thing that I'm talking about right now is my new book called Build From Now: How to Know Your Power, See Your Abundance, and Nourish the World. If you want more insight into the book, you can actually take a free business quiz over at buildfromnowquiz.com. Easy to remember. Multiple choice quiz. It will give you insight into your biggest resource. The basic thesis of the book, or argument, whatever you want to call it, is that we all have the opportunity to make an impact on the world, no matter who we are, because we all have four resources. We have focus, we have agility, we have time, and energy. Focus, agility, time, and energy. I call them the fates. I break it down in the book. The quiz actually will tell you what your main resource is, so you can start making it in the world. It's been crazy, particularly in America. We can get into that in a second, but that's actually informing the discussion about our show today, about handling a loss, personal or otherwise. Also, if you are a writer and you're trying to get to the next level business-wise, come through to the Entrepreneur Conference. I'm going to be keynoting it. It's May 1st and 2nd, so they're going to be closing the doors soon, virtually, of course, because it's a virtual conference. We're not doing it in person yet. Maybe later on this year. But for right now, we're doing it online. It's, as it says, for authors, or people that want to be authors. I would even expand it to writers. My background is journalism. So people who want to do that, but then are also trying to get their business together. There's the business of writing, and then there's the business of your business, right? There's a business of writing where it's like, I'm going to get up at a certain time. I'm going to have this writing routine. We can talk about that all day. I've actually talked about that previously on the show. Or if you go to the YouTube channel, and I'll throw it up now at youtube.com/BrownDamon. You can catch one of the approaching 100 episodes that I've done, and some of them talk about you actually becoming a writer. I've been a professional writer for, let's say decades. We'll leave it at that. And so you have the business of writing, like your habits, your creativity, etc. But then you also have the business of your business. That means contracts. That means bringing your worth, which is the title of the show, bringing your worth. That means getting what you're supposed to get and then some. That means looking at everything as a partnership. That means not waiting for permission to build your community and build your audience for the writing that you're doing. And then to go off the Bring Your Worth book that I talked about earlier, which is actually right here. And the last part about bringing your worth is understand that we all have a legacy. Those are the three things that I'm going to be talking about at the keynote. It's actually very affordable, and especially if you use the code right there, Damon15, it's actually a discount on me. Come through. I really want to support our community, particularly those of us who are creating something out of nothing, as I have, and as many of us are trying to do. If you're trying to make an impact on the world, again, at this period of time, come through to the conference, particularly if you're a writer and you're creative and you're feeling stuck. Help you get to the next level. And it's not just me. There's actually, I think there's a keynote the previous day. I'm a keynote on the 2nd. There's a keynote on the previous day on the 1st. There's a whole slew of speakers, from agents to editors and so forth. Actually know the founder of the conference, Amanda. She's killing it. Come through and support. I think you'll really appreciate the conference. And of course, I'll be talking about the conference after the fact. I also have an exclusive deep dive coaching session that's going to be happening. I'm calling it the after party at this same conference, which you can only go if you come to theauthorconference.com. All right. So today we're talking about how to handle a loss. I've been in the business as far as writing for a long time. Like I said, decades. I've been an entrepreneur for 7, 8 years, as old as my kids are alive, because I started when we had our first son. And so about 8 years ago, 9 years ago, I became an entrepreneur. And I could regale you with hours of losses, as any creative, any person who's trying to push their boundaries. I did eventually end up selling my last business. I have had best-selling books. I've spoken at TED 4 times. Those things would not have happened without being able to accept that losses are going to happen. Forever, all those 4 TED Talks that I did, there are literally dozens, if not hundreds, that are on the cutting room floor. So that's kind of part of the process. So number one, knowing it's part of the process. And number two, knowing how to handle a loss. As I talk about in an upcoming show, how you handle a loss determines how you're successful later. And again, you go to youtube.com/Brown Damon. If you're not there already, subscribe, and then you'll get a notification when that show comes up. I think I have it scheduled for sometime next week, but I don't want to take anything away from our live show. But go ahead and subscribe. You'll get a notification. You'll know the show that I'm talking about when it comes to loss. I'll leave it at that, all right? And so shout out to my Amazon Live audience. I appreciate y'all. And you'll see all the books I'm talking about. If you're watching on Amazon Live, you'll see them on the prompt on the side. Hopefully that's clear to you. If you're on YouTube, you'll see the links below. If you're on another platform, just click on the description, such as LinkedIn or whatever, and you'll get all the details, all right? All right, so I'm gonna get into it. I'm gonna suggest a few books that will help you on your journey to survive and even thrive after a loss. Because again, without the loss, there's no lesson, and you also won't be able to succeed later if you don't process that loss appropriately, all right? So the first one actually is a little bit of a curveball, but it's coming out next week. So I have a second edition of my book, The Damon Brown Reader. It's 12 stories, specially curated over my 21-year journalism career. And one of the reasons why I have the book coming out, it's coming out April 28th. You can grab it on this link right here on Kindle. Thanks for the pre-order if you're feeling it. And then it's also going to be available on other platforms. I'm still trying to figure that out just because of a timing issue with making sure that's available everywhere for y'all. And I want to make sure that I got it to some of y'all and not didn't want to be too much of a perfectionist with it. So it's coming out April 28th. The link right here is to Kindle. Thanks for your support. If you're curious about my journalism career, you can check out the book. Again, it's the second edition. I did an original edition that's out of print, man, like 10 years ago. That was before I became an entrepreneur. That was before I became a parent. That was before, George Floyd, rest in peace to him, and even the new stuff that's happening now, which I don't even want to get into too deep because I don't want to take away too much from the show. But if you're up on social media right now on Wednesday, April 21st, you know what's going down. We just had a verdict with George Floyd, and then, we got more stuff going on. So, yeah. So all these things are happening. And some of the stories in there talk about these ups and downs, these losses, these challenges, not as far as how we can get over them. I think that's the wrong language, more about how we can process them. And what I've tried to do with my books, whether it's the new one, Build From Now, or even with my journalism writing, which is the focus of the Damon Brown Reader, trying to give you a front row seat and say, okay, this is how I'm processing stuff. And I have a therapist. I've had coaches, so it's not like this is my therapy or anything. I don't think this replaces therapy for anybody. As far as saying writing is your therapy, no. Go get a therapist. Go get a coach, please, for the love of goodness. But what I try to do with my writing, even before I became an entrepreneur, before I became a coach to a lot of y'all, even before I became a keynote speaker, is to try to give you an inside track on my own process. And so actually I talk about George Floyd's murder in one of the essays I have in the book. I talk about the challenges that I have as a parent, as an African American man. Like a lot of that stuff is in there, as well as the business stuff that I'm more known for. But as I said recently on an interview, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And so my identity is tied into even the coaching that I do, every TED Talk. If you watch my TED Talks at youtube.com/Brown Damon, they're all infused with my identity as a parent, as African American, as someone married to a woman of color, like, et cetera. All that's infused in there. I believe that's how it works anyway. But if you want to understand how to process losses, how to process things, this book might come in handy for you. And it's some stuff in there, like I was commissioned to do a piece for the New Yorker. It never ran. It's in there. And so you have some exclusive stuff in there that you're literally not going to find online. So check out the book, especially as we talk about losses today and how to process them. These 12 stories, I think, might help you on that. Again, exclusively on Kindle right now. It'll be available on almost all, if not all, the platforms very shortly. But if you want to support with a pre-order on this pre-order on this platform, go ahead and click the link. And it's a really affordable Kindle book too, compared to my other ones. So if you want something to read, hopefully you'll be taking a break soon. I hope to take a break soon. It's a good reading as far as taking a break, because it's just articles from the past 2 decades of my writing. So I hope y'all enjoy it, all right? If you want more insight into specifically the journalism process and my own journey, and maybe even your journey from going from maybe a more traditional work or business and moving on to something different, I have a keynote that I did for the American Society of Journalists and Authors and also the Society of Professional Journalists. They had a combined thing. It's back in San Diego when I lived there. It was many, many years ago. And it was probably, I'm trying to do the math here, 2016, 2017. I don't think my second son was born yet. So it's probably 2016. It's around that period of time. Anyway, my whole point is that you can check this out. I talk about, just like I talk about in the Damon Brown Reader, I talk about the different ways that I had to look at my own self and my own identity and realizing that I wasn't just a journalist. And after you have 2 degrees in journalism and you're making a living as a journalist for years, at that point going on decades, then that's quite a revealing process. I try to be honest about that in the keynote. So I talk a little bit about why journalism matters. Of course, we understand that way more because of the political and the social situations that are going on now. We need journalists more than ever. But also that discussion, I think more importantly right now, is understanding that there's a loss when you have a certain identity and you move on to something else. Yep. Oh, thank you for the comment, Martha. She says, yeah, I lost a lot of faith in this and so forth. I understand that's part of the process. That's part of the loss. Sometimes it ends up being financial. Sometimes it's spiritual. Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes it's physical. Sometimes it's all 3. And I've been there before too. Let's get deeper into the good content here, or hopefully good content. All right, so if you're processing a loss, if you've seen the show before, I've mentioned this book a couple of times. I cannot recommend it enough. It's ridiculously short. It's called The Dip by Seth Godin. As I mentioned, I've worked with Seth Godin under his Akimbo workshop. It's akimbo.com. I did the marketing seminar around the time I was working on Built From Now, which is my book that came out in January. But anyway, I've been a fan of his for, this book came out like 2 decades ago. I found it through actually my mother about a decade ago. It is extremely short. I'm recommending the audiobook here on the link. You can listen to the audiobook in an hour. It tells you when to quit. Now, a lot of times when we have losses, it's because we didn't stop, right? So the life, universe, God, circumstances, whatever you believe in, whatever you do, as they say, it stopped. That door was closed. They put some Gorilla Glue on it, some crazy glue if you're old school like me, and it's not opening anymore. Seth's book is excellent as far as saying, quit before you end up being forced to quit. Accept that loss before you're being forced to take that loss. I give some examples about this, about when I sold my last startup and when I decided to not have a relationship anymore, whether it's a partnership or otherwise. I talk about that quite a bit in Built From Now as far as knowing when to quit. But I also talk about that in my previous bestseller, which, thank you for making it a bestseller, The Ultimate Bite-Sized Entrepreneur Trilogy. I do not have that link on the Amazon Live or on the YouTube page, but if you click on the Built From Now link, you'll be able to find the original book back. So it was 2017 when this compilation came out, which includes the best-selling book, The Bite-Sized Entrepreneur, which is still available too if you want to go old school with it. So knowing when to quit is so important. That's as important as knowing when to start. If you want to go deeper into this, I have a show from a couple weeks ago called When Should I Quit Something? It's actually one of my popular YouTube videos. And it's, again, from the Bring Your Worth Network. So we'll call it a network now, over at youtube.com/BrownDamon. Be sure and subscribe to give some love to it and also to not miss any episodes. I want to say this episode ran probably about 3 weeks ago, a month ago. And the views aren't crazy high, but the people that did view it, like, they're commenting, they contacted me directly. And so it resonated with a lot of y'all. If you are worrying about or figuring out how to get over, how to deal with a loss, I hate the term get over, so I'll stop saying that. If you're trying to learn how to deal with a loss, one of the things that you can do is thinking about Was there a period of time where you should have pulled out? Was there a certain period of time where you should have stopped? And were there signals that said, maybe this sunk cost is enough? Maybe this sunk cost is worth sacrificing so I can not have the opportunity cost of a new idea. The sunk cost is what you put into something and you're not going to get it back no matter what. The opportunity cost is what you end up missing out on because you're still stuck on the sunk costs that you could put in before, right? Because you can't always do two opportunities at once. If you're familiar with my work, you go to damonbrown.net. You know I do a lot of stuff. I've always done a lot of stuff. I think I call it multi-hyphenate now, right? So I'm a multi-hyphenate. Like I produce this YouTube show, I do keynotes, I do one-on-one coaching, I write books. This is my book imprint. Most of my books are over here, so it's like all these different stuff is going on, but you have to know when you can just really focus on one thing. One of the things I'm focusing on is connecting with y'all. I quit some other things. That's part of the game. This video will help you with that. And that's a really good companion, again, to Seth's excellent book, The Dip by, again, Seth Godin. I have the audiobooks. That's the link in there. That's my favorite version of it. If you get the physical book, it's like 90 pages. Please just grab it. Like it's an awesome book. All right. So if you're processing a loss, this is more on the business side of things. And we'll get into the deeper stuff in a second. If you're processing a loss on the business side, then one of the best things you can do is look at the long game, or as Simon Sinek calls it, the infinite game, which is based on another book called Finite and Infinite Games. I cannot remember the author, but he gives them some props in there. That book has been around forever. I think it was probably written around the time I was born, back in the 70s. This book is actually pays homage to it, and then he I cannot get the words out. He updates it. Updates it. I need some coffee. Updates it great. He does a really good job on it. Of course, he puts that Simon Sinek shine on it, where he does a lot of analogies and arguments and all that stuff. But the infinite game is essentially saying you might lose, quote unquote, to a competitor today. But then you guys are both in the game still. So then they might lose to you tomorrow, right? So you don't see Apple, we call them the FANG, right? You don't see Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google basically saying we're going to defeat our competitors. No, well, they understand they're going to be around for like such a long time. They're not going anywhere. They're all multi-billion-dollar companies. Even though Jeff Bezos just stepped down, like, you think Amazon's going to go anywhere? And I'm not saying that because I'm on Amazon Live. Like, for real, like, they're not going to go anywhere. Facebook might be crippled by certain things, but they're not even going to go anywhere. I actually did a video about a week ago. If you go to youtube.com/BrownDamon, I don't have the link right now, about how you can make money without Facebook and why I left Facebook a year and a half ago. I don't even have a horse in this race. I don't even like Facebook, but I know they're not going to go anywhere just because I left. And so if you know your competitors, quote unquote, are going to be around forever, that changes the game that you're playing, right? I took a loss early, man. I could think like 15 losses I took this year, where I thought I was going to go one way and it went another way. But what ended up happening is that we end up discussing things, whether it's like a relationship, so I'm talking business relationship, whatever. And it's like, well, maybe this will fit into something else. I'll hold this loss, but then what's the long-term relationship? This person is getting on my last nerve, but what's the long-term benefit of me lashing out at them or me not working them anymore? It's so many issues. So many different problems. And so if you work on that level, man, it's like that changes your perspective, right? Even if I have one person that's listening to me right now, I know my main thing is to have the long discussion. I'm not playing the short term. I talk about that in Build From Now, where one of my favorite rappers, Jay-Z, talks about this, and I quote him in here, where I'm not playing for right now, I'm playing for forever. Right? They're saying the same discussion in Simon Sinek's book. Excellent book. I so recommend it. If you want to go a little bit deeper, check out my video on how to win long-term, Simon Sinek's strategy. I talk about how he's breaking stuff down, particularly with one example with Ford, which, man, Ford had to be around for 1800s. And suddenly, like 10, 20 years ago, they were failing. They're having a tough time. So he talks about that strategy that they use to get things to the next level. Another video I would recommend is Simon Sinek's Guaranteed Secret of Success Most of Us Won't Do. It talks about the exact same thing I talked about. I won't even get into the analogy you use, but you have to show up every single day. I've had book signings where one person has been there. And I've had book signings and keynotes where 1,000 people have been there, actually a couple thousand. And I show up the same. That's how you win. That's how you keep going over these so-called losses. So keep that in mind as you're grinding it out. All right, so if we're going deeper, I actually just went through a major loss right now, a personal loss, and I'll get into that in a second. A coaching client of mine, you know who you are, I appreciate you, shot me over this book actually before I went through the personal loss. It's called The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Dr. Francis, I believe it's Francis Weller. Even gets me emotional just talking about it. This book is powerful. I have the physical book because they sent it to me, but I think it's downstairs somewhere else. But man, it talks about grief. And about halfway through the book, I was like, I've read enough to recommend to other people. Usually I'm like, I'll finish the book. I'm not talking about to anybody, especially like Build From Now is my 25th book. This is my 25th book. I don't play with that. I'm like, no, the book might get bad at the end. I'm like, no, Francis is on this, Dr. Weller, I should say, is on to something. And it has to do with processing the grief and accepting that grief. To go a little deeper for a second, one of my mentors passed away about a month ago. If you're a regular of the show, you know this. It's actually happened just before a live show, I want to say 3-4 weeks ago. My friend, my mentor, Jane Briggs Bunning, I have a link to the story. She was that woman, for real. She died at like age 70, so she was fairly young. And she's the one that groomed me into journalism. Without her, there would be no me. Without her, I wouldn't be speaking to you right now. I wouldn't have a journalism career. That's in my life. Like, it wouldn't exist. Right? She literally introduced me to the game. I can talk about her for the rest of the time, but I won't. But there's our RIP. And one of the things that I found as I did this video about death as motivation is that, again, if you're speaking to one person, if you're showing up and you're not sure if you're making an impact, you have to realize that your impact isn't going to be obvious. To quote Seth Godin, who I mentioned with the dip, are people going to miss you when you're gone? They may or may not. If you don't show up, are people going to be looking for you? They may or may not. And most importantly, does your legacy live on with the people that you're impacting? I've been fortunate enough where I've been in the game long enough and been coaching people long enough, so you got my voice trembling, which doesn't happen that often. So it's an emotional thing for me. You know, I've been doing books for 15 years now. You know, I've been coaching for 5 years, 6 years, maybe a little bit longer, like officially coaching unofficially before. I've been in the game long enough where I have people coming back to me, or I see them and I see my impact. Those times when I didn't think I was being heard, I was actually being heard. People that I've groomed or supported, even from afar, they're doing fantastic things that I have not even touched. Seriously. What's going to happen once your time is up? You know, Jane Briggs Bunning, my mentor who just passed away, she lives through me. She's coming through me right now, talking to you. That she's coming to me as I support my wife, as I talk to my kids, as I've coached, like I'm approaching like 1,000 people that I've coached. It comes through, you know, comes through the books. Like all that is her. Now I put in my work. I'm showing up for you, obviously, on 11:30 on a Wednesday. Of course, I'm putting in the work, but I'm a result of her legacy. So I have a new video that's coming out. I think it's coming out either on Friday or on Monday. I want to say on Monday. Go ahead and subscribe or click on here and you can have the alert come. It won't bother you or anything. It'll just send you a quick email and let you know when it's live. It's every, I can't remember when my show's on. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's live every Wednesday. Every Monday and Friday, it's a recorded episode. This is a recorded episode. It's like 10 minutes of your time. Put a lot of energy into it. I actually wrote the script and the idea for this years ago, you know, actually when Jane was living. And so I'm glad that I could do the video now with that extra emotion to it because of the loss of my friend and my mentor. Anyway, if you're doing things for right now, maybe that's one of the reasons why you're having losses. Maybe one of the reasons why it's difficult for you right now, because you're not thinking the long term. You want to create stuff that lasts. Again, I'm mentioning Jay-Z's name. You know, he came out when I was in high school or something, like, and he's still relevant. His work is still relevant. I'm mentioning Jane Briggs Budding's name. She's been dead for a month. She's still living. She's going to live until I die. And then her name, we ringing from your lips, perhaps, you know, or as I mentioned her in my books. So there has to be a motivation higher than just get money today. It has to be higher than what are the results right now. That might be why the losses are hitting you so bad. Anyway, when it comes to the emotional side of things, Dr. Weller's book is fantastic. Cannot wait to finish reading it, probably tonight. So recommend that. And lastly, one of my favorites. Yeah, if you've been a watcher of the show, you know the deal. I love Pema Chodron. I love her work. I have my best friend's actually a former Buddhist monk. I've actually tried to meditate. I've been bad lately, but I try to meditate every single day. And I love her idea as far as showing up. This book, which is somewhere on my shelf, but I won't waste time with that. I think it's below here, so you might not be able to see it. That is gospel, you know, and I don't mean that as blasphemy. Just, it's a fantastic book. I actually got the book. I forgot who gave me the book, but I got it like the year that Hurricane Katrina hit. And I was one of the folks. I live in New Orleans in the Faubourg-Marigny, if you know the city, which is right outside of the French Quarter. And about a mile away from the Ninth Ward. It's like the beginning of the Ninth Ward. Anyway, I got the book. I read the book. I loved the book. And I didn't realize I would need the book like 6 months later, you know, when our city was underwater and I had to leave New Orleans. It's a fantastic book. It's super short. It was actually one of the energies, if I want to use that word, energies that inspired the original Bite-Sized Entrepreneur. Because this is like 76 chapters. And I mean, it's not that thick. So each chapter is like 3-4 pages. It's a very similar vibe. It's actually the equivalent of her best of collection, but I didn't realize that until after someone gave it to me. But I have the copy somewhere over here. I wish I could show it to you because I don't want to waste any time, but it's like dog-eared. And it's a beautiful book. It's short. Just read like a chapter a day. And excuse my language, but it'll help you keep your shit together because it sure did to me. And again, Katrina hit 2005. Over 16 years out, I'm still reading that book. Again, you processing your losses has to do with something bigger than just right now. It has to. It has to. If you're living for the now, then the impact you're going to have is right now. But if you want to have some type of legacy, if you want somebody talking about your book 16 years after they got it and 20, 30 years before it was written like Pema, if you're going to put in that work, that begins now. And that begins with processing your losses. That doesn't mean you have to rush it, but you do have to process it. I have a video, very short video. It's like 5-minute video, but it's one of my favorites. And one of the things that people keep coming through and commenting about, including recently, how to find more meaning in your life. It's super short, but it has to do with processing those challenges from loss and also allowing yourself the space to grieve. One of the reasons why we have a tough time with losses is that we don't allow ourselves to feel it. You know, I'm still feeling Jane right now. That was like 3-4 weeks ago. Still feeling it and still saying her name. And that's part of my process. And maybe a year from now, then that pain that I have in my heart from missing her, maybe will be a little bit more healed. And then I'll be able to carry on her legacy in a healthy manner. Anyway, it's almost a half an hour. I promise I keep it to a half an hour today. If you want to learn more about me, it's at damonbrown.net. If you want to learn more about Built From Now, take the free quiz at builtfromnowquiz.com. And I hope to see y'all next week. I'm going to be keynoting the the Authorpreneur Conference, May 1st and 2nd. Be sure and use the code. The price is really good. And the code makes the price even better. You're not going to get a whole lot of this game. Like the amount of people that are going to be there, as far as people beyond my knowledge, even with me being a keynoter, I can't wait to go. And again, the Damon Brown Reader is going to be out exactly a week from now, April 28th. Kindle right now. It'll be on other platforms soon. Listen, I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. I hope that helps you on your process to dealing with whatever loss you have personally and professionally. And remember that you can always bring your worth and you can always build from now. Take care.